think knowledge is so important because knowledge then opened up your mind. The more opened up you are, and then the more interesting you become, and then the better person you will be. Chinese parents always pay great attention and put a great emphasis on education. So education is vital.
On this, China and Australia both agree. To build a healthy and wealthy society, you need to educate. Education brings knowledge, and knowledge leads to discovery. Just ask the rock star scientist.
So what are the breakthroughs in this lab you've been most proud of?
I think a couple of breakthroughs, the COVID-19 detection.
Education leads to life-saving invention.
There are a couple of other exciting projects like, the rapid early detection of the cancer.
And innovation.
This innovation could eliminate animal testing.
Yeah, so this will bypass all the animal testing.
And discoveries that may one day save not just animals, but all humankind.
So this time, we've been challenged by the virus, right? Next time we could, challenged by bacteria. What happens if bacteria, whatever drug you give it to them, they never die? That's another end of the world possibility.
What would have happened if we'd had COVID first in 2003?
I don't know. Hard to imagine how we can cope with that.
The end of the world?
Could be. Seriously.
That devastating.
Yep.
You are about to meet three people whose brains are as big as their mutual humanity. Not only the rock star scientist, but also the brilliant linguist and the world-renowned Vice-Chancellor. This I can promise you, you will be a smarter person for hearing their views.
Hi, I'm Tim Harcourt. Welcome to the education edition of The Big Picture.
Amongst those who know, Barney Glover is known as Mr. Education. The Vice-Chancellor of Western Sydney University is a deep thinker about the issues confronting educators around the world in a time of COVID.
Vice-Chancellor, welcome to the show.
It's my pleasure to be here.
Now, international education has taken a bit of a hit. It was the third largest export earner in Australia. Do you think we can ever recover?
I think we can, and all the signs are, in fact, that we might recover more quickly than we anticipated. And I think we'll see 2022 pick up a little quicker than we anticipated, but it's really 23 and 24 when I think we can anticipate getting back towards the level of 2019.
Now, we've had COVID and we've also had geopolitical tensions with China, with trade. Do you think that will make it hard for the university sector to rebuild their global brand and attract students from China yet again, like we have very successfully in the past?
When you look at COVID, we haven't seen an across-the-board decline in students willing to study with an Australian university. They can't come here to Australia because borders have been closed, but they've been enrolling in our programs, and there's still this willingness to say, no, we want an Australian education. This is a quality education by world standards. So I think there's a strong indication out of China of strong demand for continuing strong links in terms of educational opportunities with Australia. I think we're seeing strength to the relationship that was perhaps unanticipated. So I'm confident that we're going to see continued demand for Australian education out of China.
Do you want to hear an amazing life story? One that proves beyond all doubt how education can not only change a life, but change the world. Then meet Da Yongjin.
So how does a boy from northeast China, in a province near North Korea and the Yellow Sea, end up being a rock star scientist in Australia? How did it happen?
That's a long story. I was born in northeast of China. The town was famous by coal mining. I was a single child as well. So my parents, they both lost job during my, junior high school period. So that the period was a bit of difficult. I realized you have to work hard, on my studies. That seems to be the only way I can make a change to my family. So in early days, I know I have to, there's no other choice.
This is very special. I mean, this is a kid not from Shanghai royalty. This is a kid from a tiny little coal mining town up near North Korea. Poor family, but really hammer into him the benefit of education. And he comes to Australia, befriends his host family, and basically goes from strength to strength to strength, winning Eureka Awards, highly decorated. But his motivation is to save the world. His heart's in the right place, and he's brilliant. He's just something very, very special, and a great example of the best of China married with great Australian education.
There's an old saying if you know well the mathematics, physics, chemistry, then you can do anything you want, down the track. So this is a very famous saying in Chinese culture. So during my high school, I was very strong in math, physics, and chemistry. So then that actually paved a very solid foundation for my career down the path.
Chinese parents always pay great attention and put a great emphasis on education. So education is vital. And that also explains these days why Chinese students all over the world is because the Chinese parents are prepared and very supportive of their education. They would do anything and to support their education. It's just that's very Chinese tradition.
Like Daeyong Jing, Jing Han had a family who believed fortunes begin with education. As a young woman in China in the 1970s, she had a modest ambition which disappointed her mum.
Growing up, I wanted to be a textile factory worker. My mum said, no, you go to university and you also study English. And then for the first time I realized, parents make a difference. We had very limited resources, so we had access to 19th century English novels. So we read so many, Jane Eyre, Charles Dickens, and all these stories. And to us, the picture of the Western world is the picture portrayed by Charles Dickens and, Jane Eyre or Jane Austen. Yeah.
Dedicated and extraordinarily talented. In 1988, Jing won a scholarship to study at Sydney University under the legendary Australian academic Dame Leonie Kramer.
There is a Chinese saying, when you know nothing, you have no fear. And early 1988, for the first time in my life, sat on a plane and left China all on my own to Australia to study at Sydney University.
That's your first time on a plane to Australia?
Yes. I came on my own. I thought, someone will pick me up from the airport. Sydney University will have the buses to say, welcome new students. And when I arrived at the Sydney airport, and I couldn't see no buses, no banner, welcome new students from Sydney University. So I waited for an hour, shocked.
Nothing there, no one greeted you?
No one.
What did you do?
So then I happened to have a telephone number of a lecturer at the Sydney University because he went to Beijing for a conference and I happened to be his interpreter. And he happened to leave me his phone number. He said, whenever you come to Sydney, you can give me a call. That was my rescue. Yes. Yeah.
Despite having the opportunity to do his PhD in the US or the UK, Daeyong Jing also picked Australia. You chose Australia. Why did you choose Australia?
Actually, the reason was very simple. So I was following my girlfriend. The girlfriend.
Romance.
Yeah. So that time I was, it was a dilemma. I was hesitating, whether I should join her in Australia or I should join other classmates in America at that time. She, came to Australia to study accounting in Macquarie University. And nearly 1 year later. So I joined her by getting a scholarship
fantastic.
at Macquarie University. So yeah, and then we later on become a family. When I came to Australia, I started to love this country, and a few years down the track, and I talked to my classmates in America, and I compare, my achievement and their progress. I think, I feel much advanced.
Very good, very good.
Jing Han also fell in love with this new, strange country. It was the late 80s, a different time.
What was your impression of what Australians thought about China at the time?
They didn't really know about communism or about China. And often people surprised when I first arrived, not only that you speak very good English, where did you get your English? I said, I learned in China. And I also know T.S. Eliot, James Joyce, and Shakespeare are very well read. Where did you get this education? In China. China have this education, so yes, the more knowledge-based we have, the more connections we have, the better understanding of the two countries. That's very important.
The first day when I arrived to Australia, I was picked up by a Aussie family, Belinda, and she drove me, I still remember that day, she drove me on a nice looking road and, with very fresh air, and once I arrived her home, she took me to the supermarket, getting the groceries. And, when I was in Australia, it was very impressive. Okay, everything's so organized. Was
it well organised at the lab at Macquarie University when you went there?
In the beginning, wasn't, to be honest. It wasn't. So that's the time, I think, teach me how to build a lab from scratch.
After doing groundbreaking work at Sydney's Macquarie University, he moved into town to the University of Technology, or UTS.
We've been building these labs from empty to where it is now, about the last 6 years. So we.
And once you got really good at science, you came to UTS, and this is what you get.
I think this is a common. Once you convince the government or the university you are doing some great stuff, they give you the funding. My lab and the institute I'm currently directing is one of the best research center or institute in the world in terms of applying the physical science and photonics and nanotechnology to biotechnology. It's a big stretch, so from basic physics and material science.
So what are the breakthroughs in this lab you've been most proud of?
I think a couple of breakthroughs, the COVID-19 detection. There are a couple of other exciting projects like, the rapid early detection of the cancer. Cancer is so deadly, we kill so many people. But the time when the doctors start to find the cancer is already in the stage 3 and 4. In the early stage, when the single cell grow into tumor, the size of the tumor become big enough, the doctors start to pick it up. Okay, but this is too late. So from the scientific point of view, we try to understand, what sort of the molecules, the molecular pathways that drives the cell, from the genetic makeups into protein makeups. And then the cells start to change and then grow into the small size of the tumor and become big enough. So that's a long pathway. And we try to track down, what exactly happened in the beginning.
This huge breakthrough centres on the tiniest of particles, nanoparticles.
They are, maybe thousands times smaller than the diameter of our human hair. How possibly we could track down at that level, at single molecule level. We understand, okay, the cells start to change. We need to be careful.
It's amazing science, which will not only revolutionise how we treat cancer, but also the animal testing currently required before any government approval can be granted.
Because we're taking the cell directly grow from the patient, right? So it's safe for the patient. We don't need to kill the animals. All the data we're getting from this chip will be more directly relevant to the patient.
So what you're saying is that with this innovation, you could eliminate all animal testing?
Yeah, so this will bypass all the animal testing.
For many educators, the rigour of the Chinese system, coupled with the freedoms of the Australian system, is a good match.
I still remember when I went to Sydney University and met my supervisor, Professor Leonel Kramer, for the first time. I was sitting there waiting for her to tell me what to do and where to live and how should I conduct my life. She asked me the first question, "What can I do for you?" I didn't know what to answer because I thought she would tell me what to do.
You were used to someone in China just telling you what to
me,
do,
that's
and she was
right.
saying, well, it's
yes,
up to you.
It's up to you, that's right. So, and then obviously I realized, freedom also means responsibility. It's your responsibility to be responsible for what you do. And I still remember the day that finally I got my degree, and by then she was the chancellor. So she was the one who handed me over the certificate. So I was stepping up over there, and she was shaking my hands and said, "We made it." Yeah, so I was so touched and moved. And afterwards she took me to lunch to congratulate and celebrate.
不要太胖，因为我也挺胖的，两个人在一块看着都是热的，以后还怎么牵手出去呢？尤其是夏天。
Among her many talents, Jing has been the Australian translator for one of China's most popular dating shows.
我今年22岁了，但是我从来没谈过恋爱。对，你能接受吗？第一，我没有谈过恋爱，我可能不太懂得。
能接受，我教你。
But her literary achievements are much greater than that, as are her astute observations.
You've been a scholar of not only 19th century English literature, but Confucianism and Buddhism and those influences. Confucianism seems to be making a bit of a comeback in China. Do you think those types of traditions are important in business between Australia and China?
I think, doing business well or successfully, you do need to know the country, you do need to know the culture. So you know how to actually negotiate and how to mediate, because each country, each culture is different, and people do things in a different way. So Confucianism or Taoism or Buddhism, they are part of Chinese culture and Chinese history, Chinese way of life and Chinese philosophy. You do need to understand and to see where these people come from, why certain things are important to them. For example, family values are very important to Chinese people. Ancestry. One thing I know is in every language, swearing is very culture specific. It's never translatable. So anything can be translated except swearing. For example, if you are like in Spain, Spain is very much Christian-based country, and you never say anything, blasphemous, or Italy about God. But for Chinese, you can say anything about God, but you never say anything about their ancestors. So this is where I think even doing business is not just about the money. It's also about understanding each other, and business build up that link. So nothing is better to have a good relationship with your neighbors in the region, and Australian being in where we are. It's so important to understand what our neighbors, who are they, and what they value, and how do we work with them.
It's a view shared by Barney Glover.
Arts and culture is one of those elements that permeates society, and it's one that we can all engage with and understand better. That brings people together, and that's something we need to encourage the dialogue, the discussion. But it is the cornerstone, I think, of enhancing understanding at a time when there's tension.
Would you say that it almost keeps the wheels of the relationship going when the political tensions are not where they should be?
Better understanding is fundamental to navigating those difficult geopolitical moments.
To be honest, we want the two countries, we want the world, to be peaceful, no fight, no argument. Everybody should work together in the right way.
We were very keen to attract interest from the Chinese government for a Confucius Institute to be established at Charles Darwin University to tap into the Chinese diaspora in Northern Australia, which I think was taken note of back in China. We were successful and obtained that Confucius Institute, because that's the basis, I think, of what has been incredibly important to Australia in terms of international education, and that's the soft diplomacy. The way we've built relationships in the region that set us, I think, on the course to having regional prosperity and regional economic development and regional partnerships developing. And right now, in a time of some really challenging geopolitics in our region, it's very important to have strong institution-to-institution relationships and people-to-people relationships.
As the director of the Australia-China Institute for Arts and Culture at Western Sydney University, Jing Han is passionate about creating connections that will last generations.
This institute is really trying to connect the two cultures. And so what I found is quite interesting. Nothing humanizes circumstances or culture better than arts and a culture.
There's a lot of these stories where they've come to Australia and they've clearly thrived, and they've clearly wanted to do something for the China-Australia bilateral relationship, in terms of science and research. So this is, way beyond domestic politics. This is saving the world, providing scientific breakthroughs, and, after SARS we could have been in a lot of trouble, but, these breakthroughs have helped us handle the pandemic.
And no one knows that better than Professor Daiyong Jing. Listen to what he has to say, because one day he may save the world.
So this time, we've been challenged by the virus, right? Next time we could, challenged by bacteria. What happens if bacteria, whatever drug you give it to them, they never die? That's another end of the world possibility, right? So we start to prepare the science much ahead of the actual event will happen.
So you're getting ahead of the next pandemic.
We have to, not only by us. I think the community, international community, all the labs, they try to build the knowledge on top of each other until we have the entire picture of how it works.
Now, this collaboration across the world between Australian and Chinese scientists and scientists around the world, that's actually been very important in the development of vaccines for COVID-19 and SARS, hasn't it?
I think nobody can resist the collaboration. So because the benefit of collaboration, just enormous.
Sharing knowledge for common goals. This shared humanity makes sense because the alternative doesn't bear thinking about.
So what would have happened if we'd had COVID first in 2003 rather than SARS? What would that have meant in terms of the science?
Yeah, so it will be shocking. It will be shocking. The SARS-CoV-2 is more contagious than any previous ones. We don't have diagnostic tool. We don't have vaccine, the advanced vaccine. We don't know what it is. We don't know how the COVID spike protein function inside the body. Of course, we have no clue how to stop them, how to treat them. I don't know how to imagine how we can cope with that.
The end of the world?
Could be. Seriously.
That devastating.
Yep. So we should all acknowledge the great contribution by the science.
Now, I don't want to embarrass you, but you won Prime Minister's Physical Scientist of the Year. Can you tell us a bit about that?
It's not really embarrassing. I think that's a good honor. It's a big honor for me. It's great recognition and a fantastic encouragement for me to do more,
And why do you like University of Technology, Sydney?
This is a great university. It's very dynamic. And I think the whole university, is young, in the middle of the city, a lot of energy. It's sort of, you cannot slow down. So because the pace, of the university is...
Got a nice buzz to it, doesn't it?
It's very fast. They move very fast, catching up very quickly with the traditional universities, but with our own style. I think the university definitely has a great potential to become one of the best universities in the world. I strongly believe.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you.
for your new country, for Australia, what advice would you offer Australia and Australians in dealing with China now?
China is quite big and is going to be bigger. So it's really for us to find a way to deal with it. How we deal with it, we engage, we know, and we negotiate. So I think it's just using knowledge for the negotiation, and then negotiation a better relationship.
Well, thanks, Professor, for your contribution to the relationship and to the big picture.
My greatest pleasure, and I really hope that through arts and culture we will have a more engagement with China and in Australia.
Do you think ultimately, even though we can engage culturally and at different scholarly and friendship levels, that the Chinese political system is ultimately different, and there's only so far you can go, even with all the goodwill in the world?
Well, I think in the globalised world we live in, it's a fairly arrogant view for anyone to take that the political system that we happen to operate within is the only political system that we need to engage with. That would narrow dramatically, I think, our opportunities for international dialogue and would destroy globalisation and the benefits of being globalised and connected, and not certainly for a moment sacrificing our principles. But you need to be able to negotiate and engage and have dialogue and address challenges in order to have the overwhelming benefits of relationships that bring researchers together so we can tackle climate change. The Australian government wants a technology solution to climate change, to reducing emissions. Well, if we want a technology solution, we're not going to do that with Fortress Australia. We're going to do it because of the collaboration between researchers and academics in Australia with their counterparts right around the world.
Vice-Chancellor, thanks for your time on The Big Picture and for having us at your university.
Thank you.